Hello everybody. In this video, I thought I'd get into a couple of different topics. I'm specifically going to be talking about 3 points, and at times I may just be ranting, so this is also a video in which I'm going to be kind of ranting. But anyway, let's get into it. So the first idea is representational thought. It's very interesting to think about representation, not only in terms of like government or governors or politicians that, for example, they're supposed to represent the people, or maybe I don't know what other examples of representation there are. I guess with identity, like when you say I represent the values or I represent the attitudes of a certain people. But in this case, I'm talking more in terms of cognition, of psychology, and maybe even like symbolism related to sociology. Now, I was thinking about this because I was reading for my subject, or the subject that I'm giving, on theories of development and learning. And Piaget is the one that talks about this. And there's actually a debate between Piaget and Vygotsky. And the debate is kind of between what is first. Is thought first or language first? And like, for example, Vygotsky says, if I'm not mistaken, he says that first we learn language, and then that develops thought. And Piaget, yes, this is right. Piaget says first we develop thought, and thanks to thought we develop language, right? So it's a pretty interesting debate. But anyway, it's a correlation between these two ideas of thought and language. What makes what? And I think to a certain extent, your capacity to think should be based theoretically on how much extensive vocabulary, how much language you can use. Maybe not even how much you can understand in terms of passive vocabulary, but how much you can produce and how well you can like mix and match and combine and give us this complexity of production of language. Because in it, you're going to be expressing alternatives in a hypothetical imaginary world, which again is representational. I mean, when we talk about representation, we're talking about things that are not that which you say they are. So, for example, they talk a lot about how this is developed with kids, and kids will have like a ball or a cat, right? And they'll say cat, right? And there's a difference. This goes back to Kant, between the thing, kind of like Kant, between the thing in itself, and then the word or the representation, the image or the word that you have of that physical concept, right? So if you think ball, if I tell you think about a ball, right, or think about the word ball, you can think about that, right? But it's not real because you can't even see it at that moment, right? So again, you're representing this, right? Now, the first idea in this idea is that's why I think artists, like artists that are related with theater, with music, any type of artists, singers, actors, I think that's why they're smart, because they need to have that capacity, in terms of drama, to create, to imagine scenarios, right? So maybe they're not smart in the sense of, remembering facts and data and being able to apply it, but or maybe some of them may be smart in terms of being able to apply it, but they are smart enough to imagine and represent to themselves and to others all of these imaginary hypothetical situations, right? All of this potential, where a lot of us nowadays, I think creativity is very limited. I mean, in schools, they talk a lot about creativity, like you need to be more creative, develop critical thinking, be original, but people just copy other people. They don't really get creative, right? So this is because, again, they represent the world and its opportunities. And it could also be where imagination and creativity really lie, which I think it makes sense. Creativity and imagination lie uh, in representation, right? And the ability to represent different things, right? And this is so uh, like this is so interesting, so mind-boggling, because you can say, well, people that are able to represent themselves, like when you explain something to them and they're able to, they don't say, I don't understand you, because they're not able to, they don't have the capacity for representation. They are actually able to represent the things that you are saying to them without your help to give like examples, more of like abstract thinking. But again, it's representational. If I can talk to you and explain things to you, and you're able to represent those things in your head because you have the tools necessary to represent them, because you've done it before, because you do it, and you will do it. You will continue to represent things in your head. Then I think that talks about your level of cognition, right? Ultimately, and your level of potential for creativity, which is the next phase, right? Like once you already know, once you can already understand, once you can produce, basically like the same thing that you introduce to yourself, the same thing, like kind of like imitation, copy paste. Then you can, as soon as you have enough practice with that, then eventually you can start creating and producing, which is, where civilization takes us. Because development, or human development, is just creativity, creating, advancing, innovating, right, with technology, with whatever we is at our disposal. So yeah, I think this idea of representation. I would like to cover it more. I still don't really understand it, but let me just talk about what Piaget and Vygotsky kind of discuss more. Piaget, um, I already mentioned, excuse me, how Piaget and Vygotsky differentiate themselves in terms of which was first, but they both agree that there is a correlation, or there is a relationship between language and thought, right? One, it's like a symbiosis or symbiotic relationship. One helps develop the other, and it's like a feedback loop, right? Yeah, because you would need thoughts, new thoughts, to create new language, right? And to be able to explain it. Language ultimately is symbolic for communication, right? But like in this book, it talks about how babies, before they're able to use language, before they're even able to like say blah blah blah, they communicate, right, with their body. So the first means of communication for humans are our bodies, right? So Piaget and Vygotsky and the complex relations between the development of both language and thoughts. I already spoke on. First, it's developed through physical objects, right? So the tangible, the physical world. And then it goes into how we use tools for alternative means, or for potential, ultimately. So they talk about how a baby will want a ball that's on top of the blanket, and the baby will then pull the blanket to get the ball to him, right, or her. And in this case, that's using tools, so like the blanket. So as humans, we're able to again represent, and not only represent the objects like the blanket and the ball, my hands, my body, but I'm able to actually play out a hypothetical scenario, like how can I get that ball? Well, I can drag the blanket towards me, and that will make the ball come to me, right? And then you think about like how in life, when we have problems, you need to make all these considerations, right? About what are my options here? What will happen if I go with option A? What will happen if I go with option B? What will happen if I go with option C? Right? Of course, we may be wrong at times, or right, but we have the capacity to represent not only physical objects, but also the tools, right, that we could use for alternative means, or in this case, for the potential, right, for the future. This goes hand in hand with intentions. So intuition is the beginning. I once wrote about this, and intention is the final goal, the main goal you want to get to. What's your intention for doing this, right? I want to play with the ball in the kid's case. But intention is the driving force that makes us act, right? So we want to get somewhere. We want to solve the problem. We want more money. We want the ball, whatever. And this is where intention comes in, because then we need to figure out how to get to that goal, how to make our intention manifest into reality, sort of to say, right? Okay, and the last idea here is symbolism, which again, symbolism, I think I spoke on this, and the book speaks on this. Symbolism is represented through language and pictures, right? So again, I could say ball, and you can picture a ball in your head, like the Toy Story ball, right? Like we already have all these predispositions, cultural predispositions, right? If I say a toy, maybe you imagine Woody, Buzz Lightyear, or I can say the same thing, ball, right, in terms of a word, and then you represent the word in your mind, right? So I once heard something very interesting. I think like a chessboard. A chessboard is representation, pure symbolism, because you have a king, you have the pawns, you have a queen, right? You have the horse, you have the tower, whatever, and you know which way they move, right? But you can do this with anything, right? You can do this, like you can even develop or create your own language. Like for example, if you grab a green ball or a green cube, and you put it in the king's space, and you say, okay, this green cube is now going to play as the king, and this red cube is going to be the queen, and these yellow cubes are going to be the pawns, whatever. uh, that's symbolism, that's representation. Or you can do this with like numbers, like I'm gonna have a pencil represent one, headphones represent two, speakers represent three, right? And then you can say, well, I'm adding a speaker plus a pencil plus headphones. What do I get? Six, no? So again, you're always representing things, right? That's kind of interesting. So I put for symbolism, images, languages, and etc., because you can use whatever you want, right? As well as like physical objects in this case. The only examples I gave here were on physical objects. Okay, so that's a mouthful of ideas, but very interesting representation. Okay, I'm gonna get into the second idea. The second idea is just this thought I had on the difference between kids and adults, and this goes back to that idea that people always say, oh, when you're an adult, you get tired, you don't have the same energy as when you were young, when you were a kid, when you were a teenager. When you were a kid and when you were a teenager, you had unlimited energy, you could do whatever you want, and you didn't get tired. And now as an adult, you work all day, you're always tired, you just want to get home and go to sleep or rest or whatever. And I beg to differ. I don't think that's true. I think as humans, we always have energy. I mean, I can't say that as you get older, like old, like 60, 70, 80, you maybe don't get tired. I can't say that, because you quite possibly could, especially if you've lived an unfit life. But I think the problem here is that we repeat as adults, as a society, we repeat things so much, and eventually they become reality, right? They become the truth. But I don't think that's true. I think it's just the fact that there's a consensus about it, right? Like with money, right? But money's not real. It doesn't exist. There's nothing, yeah, it can get you things, but that's because everyone agrees on that, right? If nobody agreed on it, it wouldn't have any value. So again, with these ideas, I think it's wrong. I think what actually happens is that when you're a kid and when you're a teenager, you don't work. So the fact that you don't work, you don't have these responsibilities to tend to. You don't waste your energy on things you don't want to do, like working as an adult. You're able to have all this energy to just use up on whatever you want, right? And that makes sense. Now, as an adult, you have to work. And when you have to work, you don't have like energy to spare, right? On things you want to do. So I think that's kind of the difference there. So yeah, this is the idea of why when you're an adult you are tired and frustrated, and as a kid you're not, because you seem to always have energy. Um, Now it's like, what would happen if, like, to kind of drive this idea home, what would happen if you made a kid work, or what would happen if an adult didn't have to work, right? If you made a kid work, right, like they did in the old days, they would probably be tired all the time. They wouldn't have all the energy to play. And if you made an adult not work, right, kind of like in this case, I don't want to stereotype, but let's imagine like hippies or people that are just like, at home all day or don't have to work, they will probably have that energy, right? But you need to also be doing things that you want to do, right? And you need to figure what that is. Um, so this idea here kind of ties in with, um, yeah, like a kid does whatever they want all day, and if an adult got to do that, then they would have energy as well. Plus, this is something that I also thought of, because there are kids that are tired, right? That not all kids have energy, and there are adults that are hyper, right? Not all adults are tired or stressed or frustrated. But like, think about like Donald Trump, right? Or Takashi 69, which I just recently saw that a video of him, and he was like taking Adderall after partying all night. And I think Donald Trump also, there were some news of him a couple months ago that he took Adderall, and then after he got shot in the ear, there was that idea that like this thing came out where like he went to some convention and he was like falling asleep, right? Because he's almost 80, he's 78. So I think you need to take stimulants, right? You need to drink coffee, you need to take vitamins, but you can be productive as an adult. You can be energetic, right? Like he is, but you need obviously stimulants. Why? Because you're doing things that aren't really driving you, that aren't really motivating you. Now, I just recently saw this from this picture from, who's that actor that kind of went crazy? Jim Carrey, I think. He let his beard grow out, his hair or something like that. And he kind of went anti-establishment, which I don't really buy that. But anyway, this picture came out, and I don't know if it's true, but he says something like, when you get depressed, it's really like your other dimension you telling you that you're not doing what you want to be doing anymore, and you need a change, right? Like basically when you get sick, it's because you need to change something, or you need to change your life, right? Which in this case I think is kind of true, because ultimately you need to be doing what makes you feel good, not in the cliche sense, but like you, and I'm not saying that because it's easy. I think it's one of the hardest things to find, like what you really want to do. And I also have to kind of play the devil's advocate here on myself and say, well, as a kid you're experiencing everything for the first time, so everything is like new, everything is exciting, right? Excuse me. And then when you're an adult and you have experience because you've already played with a ball, played video games, gone to a bar, whatever, everything gets like dull. It's boring because you don't really have new things to experience. So there's that. And maybe that's something that does give you energy, like the energy of a kid is the energy of someone that wants to explore the world for the first time. And then adults don't really have that energy or that motivation because they've already seen and experienced and heard most things, right? Like I was watching this movie critic called Christoph, and he was saying, yeah, like the older generations, the ones that are in our 30s and 40s, we want movies with something new, with fresh material, right? Because if it's the same cliche, the same repetition, right? And there's this idea also with repetition, right? Like if you repeat things, it gets dull, it gets boring, it gets familiar, and you're not really motivated to watch it or to listen to it, or to, if someone starts talking about something you already know about, or an experience that you've heard a million times, you're probably going to like shut that person out like mentally, because you're like, yeah, I know where this is headed, I've heard this a million times, right? And that's demotivating, right? So but we also can't expect to always be experiencing new things, right? Because this world, I think, uh, so far it's limited in the experiences. I mean, you can talk about rich people and say, yeah, rich people can have unlimited experiences, but even rich people go crazy. We've all heard of, rich people that start like in Squid Game, right? That they start doing like crazy things just because they've done everything, they've experienced everything, so then they just go deranged, right? Um, so yeah, anyway, but there are adults that take coffee and vitamins and Adderall or any kind, or there are these other stereotypical like hippies, right, that don't work and they always seem to have energy as well. So I just thought that was I think there's a misconception there when they say adults aren't like kids because kids will get tired. I mean, kids will have energy and adults will get tired. I don't think that's entirely true, even though there are some characteristics as to why that may be partly true. But I also think that adults can be energetic, right? Basically, that's the bottom line of this argument. And not all kids are energetic. So, yeah. The last thing I'm going to get into is logic. I love logic, especially like studying it. I think it's really complicated. It's complicated not because it's complicated to understand, but it's complicated for me to remember these things. So if you've heard me talk about logic over and over again, it's because I'm trying to get myself like really acquainted with these concepts and these ideas. So logic works on parameters of truth, and this truth needs to be logically correct in terms of being able to detect where one thing fits in with the other, right? Kind of like in these syllogisms, I think they're called, where they say like the famous one is the Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, Socrates is mortal, or something like that. So if it fits into one thing, it fits into the other, and then that fits into the other, and it's logical, right? You can conclude evidentially and empirically that it's true, right? So it's a true statement. But logic also operates on falsehood or lies or things that are illogical or not true, right? Yeah, so I've spoken on fallacies before. They're very interesting. So this is more of like a recap on this topic. And I'm just going to talk about some of them. I'm going to be coming out with a video soon on abstracto, on my abstracto section, talking about the ad hominem fallacy, which is like targeting the person. Like, well, basically you're a piece of shit, so you don't know and you're wrong, right? Because you're a piece of shit or because you just don't know, because you're a bad person, which is an ad hominem fallacy because the person has nothing to do with the argument, right? And I don't know why. I don't know if I have like a fallacy antenna. Whenever someone says something that is illogical, I kind of detect it. And sometimes that's why I'm saying I need to practice this more. Sometimes I can't really put my finger on it, but I know it's just wrong. So the first fallacy I want to talk about, which actually includes two fallacies, but it's a statement. The statement is, well, I did it because everyone else is doing it, right? So this is both a generalization fallacy and a bandwagon fallacy. A generalization fallacy is like saying, I've done it with everyone, or I've done this with everything, right? Like, which again is kind of tied into another fallacy, the appeal to tradition fallacy, which again, these things have nothing to do with the correct way or the best way or the logical way of doing things. It's just because this is the way things have always been. It's just because everyone is doing it, right? It's popular. That's the bandwagon fallacy. The bandwagon fallacy is like everyone jump on the bandwagon because everyone's doing it. It must be right. It must be logical. And it's like, no, like, there's an appeal to the majority. If everyone's doing it, it kind of gets you irrational, like the Nazis in World War II. And you want to do it, right? Because everyone's doing it, and you don't want to be left alone. But it doesn't mean it's logical, right? So it says, however, even though something is consistent or popular, it doesn't make it right or the best choice, as I just said. And there's this other one too. I'm going to talk about a couple other ones before I finish this video. This is how things have always been, which I already touched on. This is the appeal to tradition. I'm guilty of this one. uh, because I don't really like when things change, and when things change, this is my argument. It's like, well, this is the way we've always done it. But then I asked ChatGPT about all this, and it told me that you should consider other better ways of doing things, right? Um, but I gotta say here, I am a little bit lazy in terms of this, and I just kind of say like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like if it's working just fine, I don't want to take the risk of improving and then just having it be worse in the future. Um, so yeah, I'm guilty of this. Sorry, but yeah, I could try improving in this in terms of saying, well, you know what? Maybe we've always done it like this, but you know, if we change it up right now or switch it up, it may not only be fun, but it may actually be a better way or the best way of doing it up to this point or up to now, right? So there may be a reward in it, right? And it may be beneficial or more beneficial than it has been. Which I also believe that there are a lot of traditions that just need to go in general in society. But that's another topic. Okay, another one is hasty generalization. Now, hasty generalization is also something I'm guilty of. This is when you have a particular situation and you just make like a whole, like universal general conclusion from it, right? Now this is like I'm gonna give an example. Like you meet a person from a different country, let's say from Russia or from Korea or Japan or whatever, and they're very friendly. That person is very friendly, and then you just assume that all Russians or all Koreans or all Japanese are friendly people, right? Or you meet a rude person from another country and you assume everyone from that country or from that culture or nationality or whatever you assume they are all rude, right? So it's a hasty means fast. You reach that generalization in a quick, fast way without really considering that it's not in that other thing, right? The logic thing. Which again, I forgot that rule, but yeah, I know it's based on that. It's based on the truth, and well, in this case, it's based on not being sure. You don't know that. You would literally have to go to that country or that culture, and meet everyone so you can actually verify that indeed they are friendly or they are rude, right? Um, so yeah, that's an example. And the last example I'm going to give is false dilemma. False dilemma, I'm also very guilty of, and I found this to be interesting because if it's solved, it can actually give you like more nuanced perspectives, more variety, more alternatives. As I was speaking about representing to yourself like the alternatives, I think we're very limited as humans, and we do see this in a lot of people. The false dilemma, a dilemma on the horns of a dilemma, is basically you have two options, right? Uh, but it's false because you always have more than two options. So the dilemma is like an example could be we either do it my way or I leave, right? It's either my way or the highway, right? It's black and white. I either go or don't go, right? You're either here or you're not. You're either working or you're slacking off, right? And we know that life is not black and white. Actually, black and white thinking, I think, is deals with like personality disorders, right? Paranoia and anxiety, right? Where it's either this or that, right? And it's very rigid. It's very like inflexible, right? I think that's the word, inflexible. So, in order to be a little bit more flexible and more adaptable to the circumstances or to the situations in which this fallacy may be applied, you would need to consider other options, right? Is there a way that even both of those could coexist? Is there a way for it to be my way and the highway? Or is there a way for it to be neither my way nor the highway, right? We can start off with that, just affirming both or negating both. From there, we could take it to more like I'm thinking of taking characteristics from both, right? And kind of like, well, you know what? My way means, defining both things. My way means that I don't work past 5, that I get paid vacation, and that I get a raise. So then maybe they might say, well, you're not going to get a raise, you're not going to get paid vacation, but you can leave by 5. We can work with that. And then maybe their side of the deal is like another 3 characteristics, but where one is agreed upon, right? So it's like meeting halfway. It's like, or like doing what Chris Voss says in his book, Never Split the Difference, where it's like finding the black swan, right? Like things we didn't even know existed. Like maybe it has nothing to do with that, but maybe you will get an honorific title mentioning your hard work at the company. And that's what I really want. I really just want to be recognized, right? Or I want a bonus. Who knows, right? Like there are other options, right? Basically, it's what I'm getting to. So you can start with that, affirming, negating, just kind of as a fun exercise. And then the other thing could be looking at the characteristics of both extremes, right? And then trying to find like all of this nuance, gray area, this in between or past those extremes areas that maybe we're not looking into because we're not representing those things. I mean, if you look for it, you will find it, right? But the idea here is that you don't get stuck or you don't get stubborn into this black and white thinking of like it's either this or that, right? A false dilemma again. Okay, so excuse me. That's all I thought I'd talk about in this video. Let me know what you think about all of these topics. I kind of got anxiety from making this video, but it is a lot of information, I think, but it's very interesting. So yeah, that's all I got for this video, and I'll see you in the next one, all right? Peace.